Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, August 21st. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 9 days. We are under double digits, single digits now. We're just 1 day away from double digits for the game against Michigan. 100 days exactly on that one. We'll be in double digits tomorrow. We're getting there on both fronts. If you want to get somewhere for lunch, I would suggest the good folks at Grateful Griddle. It is Columbus's favorite food truck. They are serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. Got a little bit of sort of administrative college football playoff stuff. There was an announcement on Wednesday morning that could have a fairly significant impact on that game between Ohio State and Texas in just 9 days. I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He saw the press release, put it on our message board with essentially the title, you can just call this the Curt Cignetti rule. Tony, what have the good folks at the college football playoff done now?
What they've done is to impose some new, or put more weight on some analytical data points that they have, where they've, and I'll quote it, changes for the upcoming season include enhancements to the tools that the selection committee uses to assess schedule strength and how teams perform against their schedule. The current schedule strength metric has been adjusted to apply greater weight to games against strong opponents. An additional metric, record strength, has been added to the selection committee's analysis to go beyond a team's schedule strength to assess how a team performed against that schedule. This metric rewards teams defeating high-quality opponents while minimizing the penalty for losing to such a team. Conversely, these changes will provide minimal reward for defeating a lower-quality opponent while imposing a greater penalty for losing to such a team. And that's the gist.
So, first of all, I award you 7.5 out of 10 for your reading of that. There was no bylaw number and letter combination at the start to read, so I feel like that probably hurt your strength of record there on that reading through no fault of your own. This is one of these things where it's like, yeah, I get it, I like it. I think this maybe perhaps incentivizes people to schedule differently. I would question whether this is something that you should be releasing 9 days from week one, when it's probably a little too late to schedule, change how you're scheduling stuff. Like, you could have given this, you could have announced this 12 months ago that this was coming for this year, and maybe allowed people to, change their schedules to benefit that, or to address that. But that's neither here nor there. It will, in fact, have quite an impact, it sounds like, on the Ohio State-Texas game, because this is something we've sort of talked about in the past, where the team that wins that game functionally is probably just about in the college football playoff. But now it seems like the team that loses that game maybe doesn't lose too much for scheduling it, which this is one of these things that we've talked about with the SEC for years. And the SEC always, every SEC win is worth 1.5 and every SEC loss is only worth half. So, so SEC teams end up with 10 wins in 8 games somehow. So this time it seems like it's going to benefit Ohio State and Texas. That's good. And it seems like it's maybe going to incentivize teams to schedule more good games like this that you would maybe want to watch, rather than Ohio State, Akron, or Texas Southern.
In theory, Tom, but these rules, these adjustments were made after, quote, months of discussions and talking. So who's to say there won't be more changes and tweaks next year and the year after that? Because they tweak it every year. They look at different things every year. And I think for me, when I saw this, the first thing I thought was, this is an adjustment because Indiana made the playoffs and Alabama didn't last year. Except, of course, Alabama lost games that they shouldn't have. But in the future, when they only lose one of those games, then this would get them in. So I view this, I'd love to view it as, hey, this is incentive for non-conference scheduling. I see this as an adjustment that will make sure that a one-loss Indiana team maybe doesn't keep a 2-loss SEC team out with some legitimate wins, which Alabama had last year. Just that third loss really kept them out. And so to me, this is a way to allow the committee to use these strengths, these adjustments, and weight them as they want. Because remember, they have their different things that they can choose to put the most weight behind. And so for me, I just see this as an opportunity to put the team that you'd rather have in there, as opposed to the one that you're kind of not grandfathered into, but like, well, they just have the one loss and it'd be a bad look. So I think this for me is, it gives the certainly benefits the SEC scheduling, because we know there are more quality teams there. And so I think, right. But the thing is, and that's the other thing, where are these metrics coming from? Are these ESPN metrics? All of these things, these are proprietary things where, okay, what have you adjusted? And what is this based off of? And how much of this is based off of the preseason rankings and then your schedule strength because of the 8 conference games? I'll stop talking, but there's a lot of ways that this can be tweaked in a way to benefit and the SEC. And not to be a conspiracy theorist, but I see this as something that benefits the SEC.
Well, it all depends on what you're putting in. And there's an old computer programming phrase, garbage in, garbage out. And you can put in whatever metrics you want to, and you can tailor that to whatever outcome you want to get. Now, a team like Ohio State, ESPN probably wants Ohio State in the college football playoff as much as they want a bunch of their precious SEC teams in there. So this is probably something, especially with the way Ohio State schedules non-conference. They got upcoming series with Texas and Alabama and Georgia. And so this would sort of incentivize you to keep those on the books and would probably benefit Ohio State against all of those teams. But also, I'm very leery of the more subjective it gets with the College Football Playoff Committee, the more I kind of get a little concerned about, well, are you going to get pushed into something or other? I'm also very interested in how this would have impacted last year's sort of setup, because you look at Ohio State. Ohio State had a road win over Penn State. They had a home win over Indiana. They had wins over 2 college football playoff teams. They had a road 1-point loss against the number 1 team in the country, but they had a bad loss against Michigan. So then they were behind Penn State, even though Penn State's best win was mumble, voice trails off. And they also had 2 losses, including a home loss to Ohio State. And if you watch those teams in the playoffs, it was pretty obvious which of those teams was the better team. But Ohio State was behind Penn State, and it was basically, well, they had 1 bad loss. And so therefore, that was the deciding factor. So I would be interested to know whether under these guidelines now, because Ohio State had better wins than Penn State had, would that have given them more credit? And would that have vaulted them over Penn State? And then Ohio State is playing SMU and Boise State in their first 2 games instead of having to play Tennessee and Oregon in their first 2 games. Now, it all worked out for Ohio State, but there's plenty of ways it could maybe not have worked out for Ohio State. So it'll be interesting to see whether that changes anything. Big picture, to me, I think the most interesting piece of this is something that you and I have talked about a bunch on these different shows, and 8 conference games and 9 conference games, and all these conferences want to fight and they want to tell you, oh, we're going to do whatever we're going to do. You can incentivize whatever change you want to incentivize in college football by changing the criteria for the college football playoff. You want to incentivize teams to schedule great non-conference games? Great. You just potentially did that. You want to incentivize teams to play more quality games and, perhaps adding a 9th conference game for the SEC. You probably have just done that to a certain degree. If you want to incentivize teams to not schedule terrible non-conference opponents where it's going to be 63-0 in the second quarter, this is a lot like teams in college basketball where you can game the quad 1 wins and your RPI and all that stuff. And you see teams that have figured out how to game the system and they schedule that way. If you're trying to get teams to play more interesting opponents out of conference, in conference, maybe even get conferences to sort of do a little bit of a tiered scheduling where, hey, Maryland and Rutgers and Northwestern, you're not officially every year rivals, but, you're kind of like, why don't you guys go play in the corner and Ohio State will play Oregon and Texas or Oregon and Penn State and pick a team, USC, whatever, a little more often. That wouldn't be a bad thing either.
I keep wondering about the incentivizing and as opposed to punishing. punishing programs for not doing this? And would that be the more effective way to get people? Would that be the more effective incentivizing? I guess it just depends on what decade you grew up parenting, whether it's like by kindness or by the paddle or whatever. But one way or another, they need to do something to fix the non-conference stuff. And you and I have talked about. I think the best way to do that is with the auto bid, so you don't get punished for it. Then it's like, well, if you don't get punished for playing games, what's the point of playing them? Because they're fun to watch. Like, it's fun to watch one versus
fun
two.
And enjoyment, you say. This is an entirely new thought. I don't know.
Yes, I know, and I'm one of the only people out there. I'm alone on a lot of islands, Tom. I don't know if you know that about me, but if we could get back to the way non-conference scheduling used to be, which was big versus big, that would be great for everybody. And whether that's through this or through some other form of, let's do it. Let's figure it out. Let's try to incentivize it. But also, Tom, the other thing is everybody needs 7 home games every year. So then it becomes more difficult to do that because I can't give up a home gate because we've rev share and all of the different sports and this building and that building now and the way that the salaries are now. So you can do so much of that, but you can't do it like it was. You can't do like the Big Ten probably can't do 3 Power 5, Power 4 opponents in non-conference anymore because to be able to get everything scheduled, I don't know that you can get everybody getting the 7 home games they need, but whatever you can do to incentivize better non-conference scheduling. And let's be real, like you don't need 3 Power 4 games to make it better. Just 2 is fine. 1 for a lot of programs is fine.
Right. Yeah. If you can get, the Big Ten, for example, they get 9 conference games. So every other year, you're going to have 5 home conference games. That means that year you can go on the road in non-conference and play a power conference team and you still have your 7 home games. And then the other year, when you've got 4 conference games at home, you can play the home half of the home and home of that power conference opponent. And if you're playing 9 conference games and 1 power conference team out of conference, great. That works out fantastic. Then you've got your 10 power conference games, and you can go play your in-state MAC opponent. Texas can play its in-state Texas opponent. LSU can go play Louisiana - whatever they want to play, and that's all absolutely fine. The SEC, 4 home conference games every year. You got 4 non-conference games every year. You can play 3 of those at home, get your 7 games, and then you play a home and home with a power conference team and at home and a home and home with a power conference team on the road, and you still get your 10 power conference games, and then everyone's all sort of in the same boat. You want to play 8 conference games? That's fine. Do that by all means. Just get to the same number of power conference games. We will see how this all plays out this year. Going to be, a fun and interesting twist to see how much, this is a great and fun and easy thing to say in August. What are they saying on November, I think, 4th this year, which is the first college football playoff rankings reveal? Well, we'll all find out together. We'll be there with a live show for that. But before we get there, we got a lot more to talk about. We got Buckeyes. We got Texas Longhorns 9 days away. Tony is going to be headed over to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center shortly for Ohio State tight end interviews, wrapping up our summer or fall camp interview series with the different position groups. And then we turn to game week next week, week 0, college football coming up on Saturday, game week for the Buckeyes and Texas Longhorns starting in just a few days. Boy, oh boy, if you have not become a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com, what are you waiting for? The season is here. It is time. We'll have coverage of the Buckeyes, coverage of the, rather significant 1 versus 2 matchup to opening the season. And then what should be a really fun fall in Columbus, Ohio. Join us there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.